Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters, and it's the post-match reaction to the Liverpool Premier League game today, which finished Newcastle United 1, Liverpool 3. And Neil, I'll start with you, mate. It was a little bit like pulling teeth this season, wasn't it? And that game just about summed it all up.
Well, the first 30 seconds were great.
Yeah.
That was fabulous. It kind of went a little bit downhill from there. But do you know what? If you wanted to sum the season up, look at that game. One goal were conceded. I think it was something like 78, whatever possession against. We didn't have possession of the ball. When we get the ball, you don't do that much with it. You've got players playing in odd positions and not really looking like up for it. It was the season summed up in 90 minutes, really.
Yeah, 100%. Steve, I mean, great start. Wonderful goal by Gale. Finished the season on a high, Dwight Gale, really. And good, intelligent ball by Shelby. Caught the Liverpool back four sleeping, really.
It certainly did, didn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think that probably the whole of Tyneside was shouting for a booking for Van Dijk straight away within that 20 seconds. And then when the ball went in the back of the net, I don't know about you, but that 2 minutes that took for them to decide whether it was a goal or not was obviously, they were waiting. I think they'd rang Richard Masters up, hadn't it, ask if he could make a decision on whether it was a goal or not, check with the Premier League, because quite frankly, and how did it take 2 minutes to decide that was a goal? Absolute shambolic. But yeah, Neil's right. I mean, after the first 32 seconds, we sort of really never ever got going from then onwards, did we?
No, we didn't. Malcolm, as we've already said, great start to the game, but it was really men against boys today, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Just on that delay of 2 minutes, that ultimately proved the linesman and the referee correct. That we have to get rid of VAR. I think it is an absolute abomination in the game. It does nothing but delay. I was looking through some stats this morning, and they are absolutely shocking at the delays that are being put into the game, and they're not really. It's not as if they're really correcting that many mistakes. And I think that the game has got to flow. Players make mistakes, referees and linesmen, they'll make the odd error as well, but that's all a part of the game of football. VAR is turning it into something else, something that it's going to frustrate people. And Newcastle United are frustrating enough without having VAR on top. But with regards to Newcastle, if you don't mind, I've got a bit of a tale that was told when I joined Arsenal in '76, and this is referring to Dwight Gale's goal. The season before I joined them, and this became a dressing room sort of legend story. There was a lad called Richie Powling, nicknamed Tubby, and he was given his debut by Bertie Mee, the manager. Bertie Mee was the manager that particularly. It was his last season with Arsenal, and so out they went, and literally from the kickoff, the ball that somebody's carried the ball through, knocked it, and there's Tubby Powling on the edge of the opponent's box. They've slid the ball to him, and he's knocked it in, and so within a matter of seconds, Arsenal are 1-0 up. And for the rest of the half, somewhat like Newcastle today, had to defend that 1-0 lead. And so in the dressing room at half time, Bertie Mee walked in and gave Tubby Powling the biggest rollicking ever of his life for scoring too early. He said, you've changed the whole of our team performance by scoring so early, and we've just had to defend and defend and defend. And that was exactly the same situation with Newcastle today. And I thought Fernandes was absolutely superb today, but not many others were. In the second half, Liverpool have scored identical goals from identical situations, identical positions, because they're being allowed to come inside, across into space. Why not send them down the line so it completely narrows the angle? And I really think that Steve Bruce, he's got to start seeing all of this. He really does.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of negativity towards Steve Bruce. I think there's been genuinely think that there's been a little bit of a wake up amongst our supporters. Some people saying that he should go now. Other people saying essentially because we're at the end of the season, whether the takeover goes through or not, he's not the man for the job, and there are better candidates for the job. Neil, is that something you would agree with? Because we know the takeover is still ongoing. We know that there's obviously some kind of issue. The media, you've got some of the media reporting that takeover has gone through. You've got other media saying it's going to drag on. So we've still got this soap opera going on in the background. But as it stands, Steve Bruce is going to be head coach. He's whatever money the current owner is going to give him, he is going to have the chance of going out and recruiting and potentially spending that money. Is he the man for the job?
Let's look at the reality. Let's look at the reality here. We've had a season where we scored 38 goals in 38 games, and normally that would get you relegated. 1 goal a game is normally a metric that sends you down. And we're lucky that there's a number of teams that are worse than us. In some cases, we've ridden well up. Like Malcolm says, if you look at the performance today, you look at those look at the 2 goals, the Origi and the Mane goal. They've shown us a striker inside onto his strongest foot. If I'd done that at Wallsend Boys Club, I would have had my arsehole kicked badly, because you don't do that. That's basic defending. And we've got a guy who won all sorts playing as a centre-back. Why is he not putting that into a defence? They're basic defending things. Basic positioning things don't look right. The first goal from Van Dijk happened in slow motion. We're allowed a cross in and then didn't pick up the number one biggest header in the team up properly. These are basic things. And the formation, that today was probably one of the weirdest formations we've had this season. He doesn't seem settled on a formation. He doesn't know what his best 11 is, and he doesn't know what holes to put the pegs in anytime. And is he the right man for the job going forward? No. Takeover or no takeover, and I'm still convinced the takeover will happen. But either way, he ain't the man for the job. Giving him the money to spend right now is a danger, because whoever comes in after him might not like what he's done. That said, we're going to be shopping in Poundland. We're not going to be shopping in Harrods, are we?
No, that's right, Steve. I mean, I see a lot of comments coming in. I'm just showing them on the screen because obviously want to get your guys' views on this, on all of this. The stats are right: 38 goals in 38 games. The transfers were mainly done without Bruce's consent, or he backed them, but he wasn't the man who went out and located the players. I put a tweet out straight after the game. Andy Carroll was brought in. I always said at the start he was brought in as a publicity stunt. He wasn't brought in to defend corners. He wasn't brought in to give assists. And Andy Carroll has scored no goals this season. Joe Linton, 44 million euros Newcastle United spent on him. He has scored 2 Premier League goals all season. They're the 2 people you're relying on. Now, for me, Steve Bruce has defended his players, which I understand why he does that. But formations, etc., I just think he's been very lucky, and I just think he's been, in any other club he'd be walking on thin ice. At Watford, he wouldn't have even lasted past January.
Yeah, you're right, and I've got an admission to make. I went out the room at half time. I didn't get back in until just after the game restarted. And it was about the 63rd minute when I realised Joe Linton was on the pitch. To be perfectly honest, I honestly hadn't realised that there'd been a substitution. At one point in the second half, I actually nearly considered ringing up the Strawberry and ask if the Liverpool goalkeeper was in at the bar, because again, the camera hadn't moved that far down the pitch to actually see whether he was on the pitch. He could have well been in the bar at the Strawberry having a quick pint or, a quick half. That summed us up. We didn't even contain them, and Neil's mentioned the goals. I mean, the first 2 goals, and the second and third goal, yes, they're identical. But the first goal, was that down also to the formation? Because Miguel Almiron just didn't move. He was static. There was a 1-2 played. He lost his man. He didn't move after the ball had been played. Rose then came out, who was supposed to be playing as part of a 3, and they just waltzed past him like he wasn't there. And then the ball goes to the back post, and the 2 of them at the back post are standing around. And neither of them really jumped, because neither of them, because of the way the ball came up, could actually attack the ball, because there was no pace in the ball. It was coming down from so high. And that just allowed Van Dijk, who's probably a couple of inches taller than, to put this looping header back, which, should the goalkeeper have got it? I don't know. But the way it came over.
Nowhere near it.
No, he wasn't. And there was a part in the second half when the third goal went in. The irony was that Steve McManaman said in the commentary, as they were replaying the goal in slow motion, McManaman said that goal was like slow motion. And I went, "You've just seen it in slow motion, man, you idiot!" But that summed up. I got to the point where I spent most of the second half listening to the commentary and criticising them rather than criticising what was happening on the pitch, because I was just nonplussed about what was happening on the pitch itself.
Yeah, Malcolm, it was. We knew it was going to be a dead rubber before the game. I mean, the least you can expect is a bit of effort. I suppose the one bright light of today's game was finally seeing young Watts making his Premier League debut and getting on. He didn't get enough time, the poor lad, but he will have learned so much by getting onto the pitch in such a big game at St James's Park. And I'm sure he'd be looking forward to the day when he steps foot on St James's Park with 52,000 there.
Absolutely. Yes. It would have been hugely exciting for the lad. And you get your first appearance under your belt, and the whole football world starts to open up for you. And he did okay. He did fine in the time that he was on. No complaints about that. But there are a number of issues that I felt have needed addressing for some while now. I mentioned at the beginning that I thought Fernandes was absolutely terrific today, but what was around him wasn't. That they do okay on crossing, but when the ball's at people's feet, we allow them to run inside Newcastle's penalty area, and that shouldn't be happening. You can't allow them to run where they want to. Too much of that, and to allow them to keep running inside to create that angle that those 2 goals in the second half went in from. That's bad. You've got to be blocking that off. Show them down the line, narrow the angle. You can get away with showing them inside in maybe the Championship and divisions below, but in the Premiership, you allow people to come inside. If you're not well versed at how you do it, you're going to get murdered all the while. And also in the second half, you were talking about Joe Linton just now, Steve, and what I really don't understand with Steve Bruce is that he takes off the guy who has just scored in the first half, takes him off and puts on somebody whose goal scoring is almost immaterial. It's invisible. Why will he not play Carroll and Gale together? Big man, finisher. It's a perfect combination, and yet he continues to put together Carroll and Joe Linton. There is not a shred of acknowledgement between them. There's no understanding. There is nothing. So you've got two total individuals up front, and it's just not working. And you can see the frustration in the midfield that they're not seeing any cohesive movement going on ahead of them at all. There is nothing. And I just don't understand Steve Bruce. I don't understand why he keeps doing that time and again when it has never worked. Never worked.
Malcolm, you were talking about VAR. A message that went up there before. It's actually played a part in the relegation scenario today because there was a disallowed goal at Sheffield United, apparently. And, of course, that's now kept Aston Villa up. So relegated with Norwich today are Watford and Bournemouth. So interesting to see. VAR will have played a controversial part at the end of the season. So hopefully, what you said will get right. Look, I want to try and get through some of these comments. We're getting inundated tonight. Twisterman says, guys, what kind of conversation would you be having had we taken more points off the bottom four sides and ended up with 58 points? Would it make any difference to Bruce's review? Mitch, would you have given any different review to Steve Bruce if we'd got a few more points in the bag and we'd beaten Rafa's record? Because that's all the media seem to be bothered about.
No, because we didn't. And the fact we didn't is an absolute example about the way Bruce plays football. 38 goals in 38 games in a normal season will get you relegated. And if you look back across many, many seasons in the top flight, I reckon that's the stat that will do you. How many goals you score per game. And if your goals per game ratio is 1, you will normally get relegated.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Mind, by only scoring 38, it does give a big pat on the back to the back four.
Yes, it does.
Goals against down enough for a goal a game to be enough to find safety. So well done, the back line and the goalkeeper. And Dubravka has made more saves in the Premier League than any other goalkeeper this season. So a big pat on the back to him. But I just had the feeling from what I've seen, particularly over the last few games, that nobody in the coach's room or the manager's office knows quite what to do up front. That Newcastle today against Liverpool, they start off with Dwight Gale and Almiron running all over the place. There is just no understanding, no communication going on. Almiron runs like a blind man all over the place with no real purpose. And he doesn't connect at all with Dwight Gale. And so Dwight Gale is taken off. On comes Carroll and Joe Linton. And we've got exactly the same situation. Instead of two little guys, it's now two big guys. But there is nothing going on between them. And you can see the frustration in Andy Carroll. And Joe Linton sort of looks around and wonders what's going on because nobody can get onto his wavelength at all. And yet at the other end of the pitch, you look at the three of them at times and the way that they were moving all in. It was almost like a dance formation, the way Liverpool moved around the pitch. And it just made it even worse to see what was going on at the other end of the pitch with the Newcastle forwards.
Malcolm, when you were playing football, did you ever think about dyeing your hair at the end of the season in tribute to the team that had just won the league like Joe Linton did today?
Dear me. honestly, Steve,
I know.
If somebody had gone out with that kind of dyed hair back in the 70s, by heavens, the crowd would have given them some stick. They really would.
Yeah, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. Alan White makes a good point. We had 2 full backs as centre backs today. Carroll came on as a winger. Come on, his tactics and team selections have been amateurish. He needs to go ASAP. David Little says, regardless of the takeover, get the number 9 shirt off Joe Linton. It's sacrilegious him jogging around the pitch in that shirt. Jonathan Ward says, do a swap deal for Callum Wilson and give Joe Linton a chance in the championship. Tom Dixon says the transfer window opens tomorrow. Let's see who Newcastle bring in. Joshua King, Callum Wilson, and probably Troy Deeney. I mean, there's a lot of players who've gone down now. Of course, Bournemouth and Watford both making the drop, Mitch and Steve. There's a couple of good players giving a shout out there. Would you take, we'll go to you, Steve, first. Would you take one of those strikers if you could from Bournemouth?
Yeah, I would, yes, because although having said that, man, the 2 Bournemouth strikers have had injury problems this season and last season, to be perfectly fair. But I would take either of those. I'd like to see them both, to be perfectly honest. But I would take either of them because they can score goals. You know, they have a bit of fight about them. They have pace. They can move around the pitch. They can alternate. They look the type of players who can form a partnership with somebody. So yeah, I would be happy with them. Troy Deeney, the only drawback with Troy Deeney, I think he's 32-year-old, isn't he? I would take Troy Deeney when he's 28, perhaps, but not when he's 32. Fraser of Bournemouth was another player that's been mentioned, but I was under the impression Fraser was heading up to Celtic as a possible replacement for Scott Brown in the long term. Whether that's true or not, I think Celtic were hoping to be able to pick him up for as a free transfer. Going back to ourselves, and the one thing I would say about the formations that we have and the way that we're played, you can always guess the substitutions that Bruce is going to make. You always know who's going to come off. You always know who's going to come on, and you always know that they're not going to be effective. Because you're bringing like for like. You're moving around. It's like there's no sort of right. Well, I'll change this. I can move it. I can alter it. And Malcolm mentioned Almiron. Almiron's now changed his game from running up and down the pitch to running across the pitch. It just beggars belief that there's nobody actually got a grip of him.
And what's he achieving by doing it?
Nothing at all, Malcolm. Absolutely nothing at all.
Absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah, a lot of people asking whether the deal's been done today. I mean, no is the honest answer. A lot of media reports saying that it's been done, and Saudi sources, etc. But you don't believe it. I think we've said many times before until Amanda
Steve
on the pitch with a scarf. And
Steve, that one individual who's making that report, we alluded to him on Friday night. He's trying to keep himself relevant. I had a chat with somebody in sports media here in Dubai about that. Very listed tweets, and I'm sorry, I've shared the thoughts that came back to me with the guys here on NUFC Dubai. The word charlatan came up. No, I'm sorry, that's nothing different to what we've all been told for the last month. And the words coming out from Saudi are exactly that, and have been exactly that for the last month. Why have we all been as confident as we have been? And I told everybody earlier this week when I was tied up with a load of work shit that the one thing you've got to remember is what's the agenda about this person who's leaking this information and putting it out there. Is it pro-Saudi? Is it pro-Qatar? Or is it just to keep themselves relevant? And that's what everybody has to remember about this one.
I think, and also, on top of that, Mitch, what I would say is that this has been on the desk of the Premier League now for a very long time.
Yes.
And nothing has happened at all. And yet the transfer window opens tomorrow. Now, I think it is a shocking situation that the Premier League has caused, that Newcastle can't enter the transfer market knowing what their future in a month's time is.
They are now hamstringing one of their member clubs.
Yes, totally.
And it feels,
totally
and I can understand why people feel it's deliberate. I'm convinced it isn't.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
We talked about this on Friday night. We know that at some point during the O&D tests that a lot of work was outsourced, and some of the people that it was outsourced to actually suggested they needed to start it all over again from scratch. Now, that would certainly explain the delay, and it's wrong, and it's hamstringing a club. It's putting us in a position of difficulty, and we need this decision now.
Yes,
season's
ASAP.
done now. Absolutely,
I couldn't agree more. Because the current owner of Newcastle United is not, while this sale is in the offing, he's not going to give anything for transfers whatsoever. The people who are intending to buy would probably love to be getting involved right now at the beginning of the transfer window, but they can't touch the situation until the deal is done. And so Newcastle United are just looking on at 19 other clubs who are free to go and do whatever they wish in the market. And we are, as using the word that you used, hamstrung, totally hamstrung. And I think it is a disgraceful situation that the Premier League have left Newcastle United in. I really do.
I haven't heard Steve Bruce's interview. Obviously, we've been doing this, but apparently BT making a big thing about Steve Bruce actually being on the phone to Mike Ashley as they were going into the interview. So that will be interesting to see what develops from that. Andy Barr makes an absolutely brilliant point here. 38 goals all season, with 7 of those
7 in 2 games.
2 games, 3 versus Sheffield United and 4 versus Bournemouth. So if you take those 7 goals off, it's 31 in 36. I mean, it's
and that gets you relegated.
Taylor says, evening chaps, do people really think if we'd kept Rafa would be any better off points-wise? Hopefully things can and will get better. Keep the faith. I mean, me personally, I feel yes, because I don't think Rafa would have allowed them to buy Joe Linton. And I think the money would have been spent elsewhere. And I think they would have had at least the nous to keep a hold of Rondon. And, you know, they might have lost Perez, but they would have still had a natural goal scorer. And the other thing is Rafa isn't organised, always organises from the back. And the back four would not be as disorganised as it has been in the last 6 or 7 games. So that would be my answer on that anyway. Stephen Parker says, think this takeover needs clarity, which we all agree with. Himanshu says, points since we were mathematically safe. Moxie says, I can't see the takeover happening now. Big players look bemused on the pitch. You think a takeover on the horizon, they'd have a spring in their step. Some of them really just don't want to know.
Or Steve, do some of them know that time's up? So why do they bother?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
You could counter that with a different argument.
Very good point, Mitch, because if once the takeover happens, they are not going to want to stay at the level that the current players bring. They're going to want to go sky high and as quickly as possible. And I think that, albeit players should be putting everything into a game that they can. 1, they're being paid to do so, and 2, that they need to put themselves in the shop window if this takeover does happen.
Yeah, 100%. Stephen Matthewson says he's talking about Pereira from Watford. Yeah, there's a lot of players getting suggested. Samantha says get Jan Matt back. I wasn't a big fan of him, to be honest, when he was at Newcastle. NUFC 2, no support by the owner, gets 40 points. Same again next season, lads. Paul actually says I'd take Bruce from Bournemouth and Kidd from Norwich, young, hungry players. But yeah, there's a lot of players there potentially who would be good for Newcastle. Sean,
tell you the problem I've got with this, Steve, is we're looking at 3 teams that have been relegated from the Premier League. Yeah. And if you fill your squad with players who've been relegated from the Premier League, what do you have a squad full of?
Yeah.
And where do we go with that? And I know we're shopping in Poundland, but we should be looking for players who are not going to get relegated from the Premier League. Yeah. Yes, there's probably some good pickings to have from those squads. Cantwell, I think, is the lad from Norwich he's talking about. And I would have him. There's something about him I really like. And there are something about the Bournemouth strikers that are good things to be said. But we'll look toothless up front under Bruce. So what would he know what to do with them? I really don't know.
Yeah, Dave McGibbon says, when do we ever buy decent players from relegated clubs? So he agrees with you, Mitch. Stephen Parker says, we're getting Messi, remember, which, of course, was reported in the papers. Brooks from Bournemouth looks a player. He'd be a good addition. Barry just reminding us that Steve Bruce has been on the phone to Mike Ashley. He probably reversed the charges. Richard Morris says, players would have tried harder if we had 52,000 there. They've got away with it without the fans on their case. Graham Dougal says, comes to something when I have to admit that I miss Joselu. Of course, Malcolm and me and Gibbo were talking about Joselu. Pre-match, he scored 12 goals in La Liga this season, Joselu. Himanshu says, who was supplying the bullets for Carroll? Yeah, it's a fair point. There hasn't been much creativity in the team. Tom Dixon says, would be good if we play Liverpool's formation. We might win more games in the future. Be nice if we had Liverpool's team, Tom. Peter Robson says, I love Joe Linton. Having said that, I've had 12 cans. Jay says, Bruce's BT interview held up as Ashley's on the blower to him. Hopefully seeing he's sacked and the takeover is done. Funko Freddy says, top totty night tomorrow night, lads. Yes, we're going to have a female show tomorrow. I've blocked about 25 people for being sexist on my Twitter feed today. It's a good idea, I think. I've seen a lot of female fans getting horrendous abuse on Twitter. So tomorrow night, Sav Mondo, after a fantastic debut on Friday, is going to come on. We've got 4 other female guests, all Newcastle fans from different areas, all coming on tomorrow night. So hopefully we'll have a woman and a female perspective tomorrow night. Should be something a little bit different. So tune in at 7:30 tomorrow for that. I'm actually wondering if Mike Ashley's actually against this club. It seems the bloke is childish and petty enough to do that. I wouldn't put it past him. Jason says, I hope Rose has played his last game with the club. Another waste of space. Paul agrees. He says, exactly, he's a chancer. Sean Foreman says, well, at least the media can't go on about how much better Bruce is than Rafa, as he failed to do better, like they were making out. Yeah, Steve, that's been an interesting thing all season, hasn't it, mate? It's the whole Bruce versus Rafa thing. It's been something we've constantly talked about over the last 3 months. Well, finally, we have our answer, albeit by a point. Rafa is clearly the better manager.
It just became the sideshow, didn't it? It became something to deflect us from all the other angst that we had. You know, there were people putting out this, Rafa that, and it's been exactly the same with the Joe Linton brigade, pushing Joe Linton against those who don't agree that Joe Linton's a decent player. You know, those are the 2 factors that we've had that have played out since probably January. If I wanted to review the season, I would say at the start of the season, you know, you went into it with an air of disappointment, but you know, you always have this sort of thought, well, you know, yeah, we'll get by, we'll move forward, the club will go forward. Let's give Bruce a chance, type of thing. I think, if I was to be perfectly honest, the 2 games this season that summed up, the game that summed up for me, that was the 5-0. You know, it was only September. We got beat 5-0 off Leicester. We then went into the next game. We played Man United. We beat Man United at home, didn't we? 1-0 late on. And I thought, you know, that had shaken them up. Since then, we've never won 2 games on the trot.
Yeah.
And then we then played Leicester on New Year's Day. And to quite frank, from that 3-0 drubbing, we haven't played at all. From that moment onwards, we've played like we've been carrying a sack of hoods on our back. You know, I mean, we got by. We had terrible performances in the cup, at home against lesser league teams. You know, we got a decent result against, or what should have been a decent result against West Brom, which ended up clinging on with fingernails in the 5th round. You know, got the 3-2. We're 3-0 up, and but the performances have been poor. They've been amateurish. There's a pattern, no shape, nothing. And this season's been, from Christmas onwards, I've found soulless. I think that's the only word I could use to describe how I felt.
We've won 4 games since Boxing Day, haven't we, Steve?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Malcolm, Mike Ashley was ringing Steve Bruce to say thank you for all the hard work during the season.
I hope that was also a goodbye.
I don't think so somehow, Mitch. But who knows? It might just possibly be the last phone call that Steve Bruce gets from him if the Premier League pull their fingers out. That would be neat.
Jason says, Supermac, the people intended to buy the team are probably scratching their heads and wondering what the hell they put themselves into.
I'm sure that's right, Steve. And also, what we haven't even mentioned is, of course, that one of the driving forces in this is Amanda Staveley, and she's very occupied and busy with her other case in the High Court.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's not around all of the while to keep pushing the whole situation.
You know what? We'll go back to telephone calls. That probably is the last phone call we'll get from Mike Ashley Bruce will get from Mike Ashley until the 6th of October when the transfer window is shut, because we'll not hear from him again if this takeover hasn't happened, because that's par for the course. He'll shut up shop and then he'll ring him up and say, sorry, we couldn't get somebody over the line. Have you not spent that little bit of money I got? That's Mike Ashley, to a T. He did exactly the same with Rafa. You get phone calls on the last game of the season, and then you hear nothing until the start of next. I think it happened with, Pardew. I think it happened with certainly with Chris Hughton. You basically just told, right, thanks very much. You've done, Canny. If you remember when he did his interview on TV, when he came on, when the press people didn't even know he was going into the room, and they had to scramble along the corridor after him because he was coming on Sky to say that he was selling the club or that he was looking for someone to take it over. That was 4 seasons ago now. I think 3 or 4 seasons ago. That's what he's like. He suddenly wakes up on the last game of the season and says something, and then disappears back into his shell. And goes back to his villa in Miami for the rest of the holidays.
Steve, we've had dealings with them all along, from the trust level with William Bias and others. I think I've been. It's funny. I saw a question before. What would I do if I was in a lift with Mike Ashley? I'd have a conversation with him, because I've had 2 conversations with him. And one of them, he stayed at the end of my tour for the entire time. And the other one, he was like, I couldn't keep up with him because there was words coming out of his mouth at 200 million miles an hour. It just really, really, really out there. And it's time for him. I'm amazed if he's not pushing from the side of the seller, because the one thing that's different at the moment is he's still not bad-mouthed anybody at all. And well before this stage, in other transactions, he'd badmouth people as tire kickers.
And of course,
he must be desperate to get his hands on that cash.
He's badmouthed Amanda Staveley before, Mitch, as well. So why?
Of course, he has.
Why wouldn't he do it again if if this wasn't going through? So that should tell everybody. Peter Merrifield's just asking Malcolm, if the takeover goes through, would you love to get involved with the club? I'm sure the answer would be yes, depending on what the offer was. I think.
Precisely, Steve. Absolutely. But when the takeover does happen, I think it will be very, very exciting times. And so, who can say no to exciting times?
Exactly. Yeah. It's it's one of those things which we just hope goes through sooner rather than later. Paul Oxley says, end of the day, Callum Wilson is miles better than Joe Linton. L71 wishful thinking. Phil Foot, if the takeover goes through,
I've got a 6-year-old grandson, and he's better than Joe Linton. Trust me, he's got much tighter ball control, I can tell you.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. It's the messages are coming in thick and fast. I had a chat with Ashley years ago, me and my dad in Shearer's bar. I said, "What's your plans, Mike?" He said, "Slowly, catchy monkey." We got relegated that season. True. Jonathan Ward says, Steve, do you know if any of the new potential owners have any background in football or have advisors who have knowledge of the game? No, Jonathan, is the honest answer, because everything's very very hush-hush, as far as, this takeover is concerned. NDAs are signed, etc. When I've seen a lot of names linked, to particular positions, i.e. director of football, etc., I would say that some of them have been completely wide of the mark, and I'd say others were definite. You know, when you look at who, like Amanda Staveley knows. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I wouldn't.
And those which aren't wide of the mark do have background in football.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anybody to be coming in who isn't going to be able to do the job. You know, I think especially with all that kind of money, you know what I mean. I think it'll be a really, really good team behind Amanda Staveley, PIF, and the Rubens. And I expect, like Malcolm says, expecting exciting times. So Les for director of football, says Christopher. I think a lot of people would love to see people like that, ex-players involved, and it would be great to see. B Taylor says, Mitch, interesting comment about part of the O&D tests being outsourced. Do you know when they actually restarted this whole process? Sorry if I misunderstood.
No, we don't, and this is the problem. This is part of the problem. We know at some stage some of the things were outsourced. That's pretty clear from a number of different, very, very reliable sources. We don't know if they were restarted. But that was the comment that was made to both me and Steve, and I think it was independent of each other as well. That whoever was taking it on said, no, we need to start this again from scratch. We're not happy with the work that's already been done, because certainly, in reality, if you look at what the Premier League have been dealing with, they've been dealing with COVID, they've been dealing with restart, they've been dealing with all the legalities of making sure that they can't have their arses bitten by clubs who've been relegated, saying that the season hasn't ended in the way it began. They can't be taken to court over who's finished where in the Champions League and the UEFA Cup positions and all of that stuff. And to be fair, it's really important that it's legally watertight. So is it really important that the takeover of Newcastle United is legally watertight? And if they've got a legal department that's 7 lawyers, 4 of which are senior lawyers and 3 which are article clerks, which I gather is what the size of the department is, and they've gone at some stage, look, this has now gone way beyond what we can deal with, we need to outsource this. I think it's quite right that somebody who's maybe is at a different level to them might look at the work they've done and go, no, that's not right, and that's not right, and I'm not happy with that. It'd be like me. I tell you what, professionally, when I take work on, I take a treatment plan on from another clinician, sometimes our final destination might be the same, but the journey is very, very different. And that's not a criticism, and that's not to say what somebody's doing is rubbish. It's just we do things differently. Yeah. And I'm sure that's the same in the legal profession as well, that they all want to get to the same destination, but they might want to go about it in slightly different ways. So as a professional, if you're taking that on from another professional, you might look at it and go, nah, I don't want my name on that. I want to do it my way. That's exactly. And so I don't think that would actually be an unreasonable thing to do. Whereas it screws us over in terms of a timeline, what everybody wants at the end of that process is for the decision to be legally watertight and not challengeable, because it's quite clear whichever way they want to go on it, there's lawyers lined up with Qatar and there's lawyers lined up in Saudi who are going to challenge it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they need it to be legally watertight, and they need to have the best legal advice to make sure it's legally watertight. And so that's another additional layer of problems in this absolute... It's like a lasagna of doom with multiple levels. This is why it's become so tangled. And we're stuck in the whole middle of it, just wanting a result.
Steve, one for you there. Richard Morris says, how are the club going to choose which supporters can attend home games in October? Obviously, you've been part of the fans forum for a few years now, and obviously no meetings recently, but, that's going to be a potential minefield, isn't it? I mean, we're expecting crowds potentially to go back in October. Boris Johnson is giving government advice that anyone who's got a health issue, anyone who's obese or anyone who has diabetes should not attend big events, even in October. But we're led to believe they're going to have 20,000 fans in St. James's Park in October. How on earth are you going to decide between the other 30,000, who goes?
You know what? You're saying 20,000, Steve. I've heard and I've read articles on this topic, and they're saying that it could be down as low as 17% in some grounds because of the way that the grounds are formatted, because of the entrance and exits, etc., because of the seating plans. So you could be in a situation where it's not 25% the total capacity. It could be something as low as 17%.
Right.
How Newcastle United will do it when they've already got something like 30 to 35,000 season tickets holders, I don't know. I did read and listen to some salty comments, which I might be saying it was done sarcastically, but there might be some, there's an element of truth in it, which was, you know what, Ashley's got 10,000 people there that he gave free tickets to. Their tickets have now been used up, but he had 10,000 supporters. That was the way that somebody put it over to me, and wouldn't be surprised if the easiest way was to just give it to the 10,000 that he'd already given free tickets to, and then that way he could give everybody else their money back every month until this was taken over. You wouldn't put anything past Newcastle United. What I think the one thing you can guarantee with Newcastle United is they'll get it wrong. So
I had an interesting conversation in here tonight with a lad he's actually a West Ham fan. He was watching West Ham because the ball were being in his West Ham sport, and he was saying he lived in Athens for a while, and they tried to combat pollution in Athens town centre by saying that on such and such days, cars with an even number on their reg plate could go into the town centre, and on the other days, the odd numbers could go into the town centre. And so, in what he was saying, that's what they should do in grounds. And I said to him, but surely didn't just people go out and buy another car and make sure it was the odd number or the even number so they could go in every day? And he says, yeah, that is actually what happened. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's just not a solution, They've got to find a way that's even and fair, and I don't know if there is one.
Yeah.
And like you, I was told by somebody who's connected to Stevenage that they've been told they can have 5% next season. So that means they can have 400 fans in their ground. 400.
Crazy.
It's not worth it. For them, it's not worth it. Why bother?
Malcolm, question for you there. Jonathan Ward says, do you think Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp could improve this squad of players to go to the next level? Or do you think we've reached our peak no matter who's in charge?
Well, they'd improve the squad of players by bringing in new players, much better quality. So, yes, of course, they would change it. But guys like that wouldn't take the job under the restrictions that Mike Ashley places on it. That's why we need the takeover to happen.
Paul Daniels couldn't levitate them, man.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of people saying that. David Little says, which dafties are still buying season tickets for next season when the takeover hasn't been approved? Well, of course, a lot of people are on 10-year deals. There's so many different ways of buying a season ticket these days. It's not simply a case of buying it at the end of the season. So, there'll be a lot of people who are already committed. Keith Hogan says, the one positive about today and the home matches during this pandemic has been that our home crowd is louder than it's been for a number of years. And yes, I understand where you're coming from with that. Josh Blakey says, I think I read it with supporters who have 200 points or more will get preference at first, which is interesting. Michael Brooks says, why
can't they lend some of those points to Newcastle next season?
Michael Brooks says, why can't someone from the Premier League just make one simple statement on where we are at in the process? It would take a lot of stress off people, which I think is a great idea. I think if it is going to drag on into the pre-season, if you like, that we do need. I'm sure you can at least come out and say, look, that there is an issue. We can't discuss the issue. It is going to drag on, and I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Claire Brown, thanks for your comments. There's another interesting show. Thanks, Guy. I just wish we could all be more positive, feeling deflated. I'm sure there's a lot of people are. We will be continuing this over the next few weeks. We're not just going to suddenly go off air because the football's off. So don't think that we're not going to be doing the broadcast. We're going to keep this going on and on and on. So please stay tuned. Dave Evie says half the season ticket holders for one home match and the other half for the next home match. Interesting idea. Paul Oxley says, Malcolm, you will be banned from watching NUFC. How do you feel about that? Surely you must feel delighted that you have to watch NUFC up the Bruce. I'm not sure why he thinks you're banned, Malcolm.
No idea.
No, me neither. It's a strange
one.
What's that
all about?
I don't know. Maybe he wants to let us know. He might know something you don't. Maybe Steve Bruce speaking to Mike Ashley.
That was the telephone conversation they had, wasn't it? At the end of the game.
That's right. Golf and Geordie says, is there a time limit where the Premier League have to make an announcement? The answer is no.
No.
Josh Blake in the same...
Mine. Yeah. I just wonder what the legalities of it are. The Premier League can't just sit on it forevermore. So what time frame have they got?
Yeah.
It must happen surely within the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's got to be a decision. I would hope that there's a decision by the end of this week.
Yeah, it's got to come soon, but like, unfortunately, I just think it's going to drag on. And, you know, we're all just guessing and second guessing why there's been no announcement. That's the big problem. And, you know, if you don't know in the media, it's probably best to keep your mouth shut and just don't give people false hope. And sadly, all we're seeing is different clickbait from different journalists. Some people who've been consistent saying that it's not going to happen. Some people who've been completely over the top and, you know, just stating facts which clearly aren't facts. It's doing everybody's head in. Chris Farrer says, wish my boss was Ashley so I can be congratulated for a half-arsed job. John B says, do you think this will happen before the end of next season? Wow. God. Mitch, we don't want it to go on that long, do it? Dear me, how?
Yeah. We need it done. I think we need an answer in the next week to protect a member of the Premier League. They're now not protecting a Premier League member. They're now making us disadvantaged by this. Even if the answer from them happened to be no, it would be an answer, and then we can go about our business. So
just
keep it in limbo is wrong, absolutely morally wrong.
Yes. So just suppose, Mitch, that the deal, due to the delay, were not to happen. What do you think Mike Ashley would be feeling towards the Premier League?
Well, Malcolm, my understanding was very early on in this process was that both the seller and the buyer had legal teams ready to go to challenge the Premier League if the decision went against the way that they wanted it to. And I've got nothing to disprove that that is not the case, and nothing to disprove that that's been called off. So I'm quite convinced Mike Ashley wants his money out of this deal because he wants to take advantage of a disadvantaged high street, of a high street that is suffering of, you've got a big provider of malls and shopping centres in the UK struggling, who provides the Eldon Square and the Metro Centre. Do you not think he's looking at something like that, thinking, rubbing his hands, saying, if I've got that cash in my bank, I'm going to make hay? Of course that's what he wants, and of course that's what he needs it, and he wants it now. He wanted it 2 weeks ago, and he wanted it 4 weeks ago. So is he prepared to chuck money at a legal challenge for something like that? You bet he is. He's one of the most litigious people in the world.
Yes.
And so my understanding is that they're there and they're ready to go. And that's what also, however, the flip side of that is I'm quite sure the Premier League are aware of that. And that's why they want it legally watertight. That once they give a decision, it's legally watertight and it can't be challenged.
Yeah. Ray Clayton says, with or without the takeover, we need a spine through the team, a centre-back, a centre midfielder and a centre-forward, players who command, and a goal scorer. What's your thoughts on this? Steve, first to you, and then Malcolm, and then Mitch. We do need new players, but like we've said, we're not sure, what we're going to have to spend. But are there any players out there who you'd like to see Steve Bush go out and get straight away?
You know what? I think we've spent that much time talking about, over the last 15 weeks, talking about the takeover, that we've lost sight of the fact that we do need a spine of a team. We do need that to replace certain players in that team. We've talked about Wilson, we've talked about King, we've mentioned Deeney today. They were just three names that have come off the top of people's heads because we've reached the end of the season and both their players, both teams have gone down and people are thinking that they're free and available. I think that, that there's the one that excited me. I heard an article and read an article in the paper this morning about Jovic at Madrid, and possibility of him being available on a loan deal. The lad's only 22, however, you know, and he hasn't played much this season at Madrid. He's obviously got a lot of potential if you go to Madrid. Is he the type of player? He's Serbian. Is he going to end up like Mitrovic? I honestly don't know. Centre half wise, you know, again, yes, a spine of a team is what we need, and I think we talked about the need for that with leaders among that spine. You know, someone who can lead a line, someone who can run a proper line up front, someone who can organise a defence at the back, and someone who's that majestic midfielder who can take a game by the scruff of the neck. And you look at the way that Hernandez at Man United came in. Everybody was, you know, there was people criticising them for getting them. That took them a long time to pick. He's a quality player who's actually come into the Premier League and being able to take it on almost immediately. And it hasn't been, and that's quality when someone can do that, because normally it's going to take 6 months to 12 months to bed somebody in. And I'd like to think that we've got a system of scouting out there that is identifying those type of players, a player that they know has that quality. Rather, you know, I'm not going to just throw names about because, you know, I just don't know them.
Yeah. Down to the last 5 minutes, guys. It's been a great hour nearly, so we'll have to finish it in 5 minutes. Scott Crom says, ask Supermac what Joe Linton is doing wrong. As an ex-deadly striker, he'll see where he's going wrong. Malcolm, can you advise?
Yes. You've got it the wrong way round, Scott. It's a question of what he's doing right, and the answer is nothing. Because he hasn't got the ability to get it right. He hasn't got the wherewithal between his ears, and he hasn't got the physical desire, nor has he got the actual physical abilities that a footballer needs to go and really succeed at this level. And so he can't get it right, and therefore he's wrong all the time.
Yeah, great news from Lee Ryder. Breaking news. The whole squad's just had a Zoom call with Mike Ashley. I bet that was exciting. I think he's probably offered them some Slazenger trainers, as one of our viewers suggested earlier on, for getting such a great league position. Tom Dixon asks a good question, Malcolm. I'll direct this one to you as well. Would you keep Dwight Gale, Malcolm?
Yes, I would. I've got a lot of faith in this lad, and faith that I think that managers over the past 3 seasons just haven't had in him. You know, and he's spent a lot of time out on loan. He will score goals. He's not going to be joining in with the play and mesmerising defenders, but he can sniff a goal where others can't, and his finishing rate is excellent. He'll miss one, then he'll score one. He'll miss one, then he'll score one. That's a great average. And it needs the right person alongside of him. And this is why earlier in the programme that I said that I'm so disappointed that you never see Carroll and Dwight Gale together. They're the ideal combination. But it just doesn't happen. But yeah, stick with Dwight Gale, but get the right person beside him.
Yeah. Paul Oxley's explaining the reason he says you're going to be banned is they won't let over 70s in next season, Malcolm. That's why. That's what he was trying to say. Not that you're banned. So good news and bad news, Malcolm. Thanks, Paul, for clearing that up.
Well, that'll exclude John Gibson as well then.
It will do, yes. Yeah, exactly. Supermac would have still got us 5 goals this season, even at his age. Right place, right time. Thanks, Scott. Matty Longstaff, lads. Final point for tonight's show. Mitch, we've discussed it a few times over the last couple of weeks. Wasn't in the squad again today. You know, apparently he had an injury. Is Matty Longstaff going to pull on a black and white shirt on September the 12th?
I can't see it somehow. I really can't. I think that the club have seriously let him down over the last 18 months. They haven't really gone out of their way to tie him down on a contract, which should have been done 18 months back. And they've just let the whole situation drag on and on and on. And I think that there are people who will want to take him onto their staff, and I'm sure the lad will go in the next few weeks, and I wish the lad all the very best of luck. I hope he really does well, and of course it will rebound on Newcastle every moment of success that Matty has.
Yeah, Mitch, do you agree? Is that the last we'll see of Matty Longstaff?
I can't see. I think the way Bruce has not played him in the last few games says a lot. His absence speaks volumes.
Yeah, Steve, is that farewell? Is that Auf Wiedersehen, Matty?
No, I'll go the other way and I'll say, you know what? They'll keep him because it'll cost them nout.
Yeah.
It means that they don't have to go and replace him, and I think that's there's more likelihood of them doing that than anything else. And I think there'll be something.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, Steve, that what he's been offered by Newcastle is, as far as Matty's agent is concerned, is only half of what Udinese are preparing to pay him.
Yeah.
Allegedly, yes, and now Watford have gone down as well. Remember?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things develop over the course of over the summer. That's the season at an end. I will be back tomorrow night with Sab Mondo for a ladies' night special. I will be back with Malcolm and John Gibson on Wednesday night, and me, Neil, and Steve will be back with a few selected guests on Friday night, but there'll be a little bit going on in between. We've got a few ex-players lined up, etc. So once again, thanks for joining us. Been an eventful day again at St James's Park. But from me, Malcolm, Steve, and Neil, thanks for watching and good night.
Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Good night, guys.